So if you have just joined us, we're waiting for people. There's people signing in right now. We have a fabulous group going here tonight. I think we have almost 31 people here. You're so famous, Fawn. So
You're gonna make me nervous.
we're very lucky to have Fawn Anderson here tonight. And if please make sure, it looks like everyone is muted right now, but please make sure to keep your microphone on mute so we don't accidentally hear some background noise. So we appreciate that. People are still signing in. This is fabulous. So just so you know, if you haven't met me before, my name is Farah Green, and I'm lucky enough to be here with my longtime friend, fellow instructor, fellow horseman, Fawn Anderson. And she agreed to do this fabulous meeting here with us tonight. She has a very interesting topic, so I'm excited about sharing that with you, called mindfulness in training. But before we begin, we're going to tell you a little bit about how we met. So I am a graduate of the early instructors training program. I was there for 12 years, a 3-star instructor. And the first day I walked onto campus, I saw this girl hovering over her beautiful buckskin horse, and she was looking at his hooves, and I thought she was doing something really interesting. So I happened to walk over and started talking to her, and it just happened to be Fawn Anderson, who was an instructor long before I was down at the Pearly Center. And I just really enjoyed talking to her. I know she was a knowledgeable person. She taught me all kinds about feet that first day, even if she didn't know she was doing it. But Fawn, it's a pleasure to have you here tonight. And let's just talk a little bit. So we actually got reconnected. By the way, if you don't know Fawn, she is sorry, there's a bunch of people signing in and out here. She teaches classical, natural, and vaquero horsemanship. And so she's going to tell us all about what that means tonight in her presentation. She currently resides in Virginia, in Carrollton, excuse me, and she teaches at Mary Oaks Stable in Windsor. And Fawn and I have known each other for about 12 years, and we got reconnected through the International Horsemanship Association. Fawn, why did you find the International Horsemanship Association interesting at first?
Sorry, I'm trying to still learn how to use Zoom here. I'm definitely level 1 in Zoom. Thanks to the IHA, actually, they've been giving me a really good Zoom education. No, that's a great question. Actually, I first became interested in the IHA. I mean, one of the reasons was because of the people that were involved, because I knew Farah and I knew Sandy and I knew quite a few other people that were on the board, and they were people that I had a lot of trust in their integrity and their intentions. So that was one of the things that made me interested in it. And then the other thing was the message. When I started speaking with not only Farah and Sandy, but all the members of the board, I just had conversations with everybody to get an idea of where you guys were going with things. What really struck me was the sense of collaboration that you guys were after. You wanted inclusiveness and collaboration, and you really were looking for something that had the best interests of the students and the professionals equally in mind. And to me, that was something I could get excited about. And the whole idea of having that family unit and working together is something that's really important to me.
Well, and I'm so happy you brought up the word family, Fawn, because that was the initial intention of the IHA, to take those people that we had met through our horsemanship journeys and then bring them back together in a way that not only they could find excellent students out there searching for more information, students could connect, but also instructors could connect with each other, because I learned so much from you while we were there at the center, and I want to keep that sense of community and collaboration going. So I so appreciate the many hours you've spent with us, kind of revamping and relooking at the message that we're putting out there, because I view this as a continuous project. It's definitely not going to stop. We're going to keep evolving as we go on. So thank you for your faith, Fawn. And what do you feel like, I think you already mentioned this before, but what benefit did you feel like the IHA would have for potential instructors?
For me especially, not all of us belong to like a big organization or a brand. There's a lot of amazing instructors out there who are just out there on their own. And to me, one of the tragedies of that is a lot of them, don't collaborate with each other. So they're missing the opportunity to share and learn from each other. And I'm also very interested in dog training, as an aside. And there's an organization called the International Association of Canine Practitioners. And when I found out about them, I thought what they were doing was amazing. They were providing a place to bring professionals together. They would hold seminars once a year. Professionals would go. They would invite people that were doing really cool, neat things to give presentations. And as a community, they would support each other, learn from each other, and grow as an industry. And I just thought that was amazing. So I'd already heard about them. So when the IHA, when you guys came and approached me, I'm like, yes, we can do what they're already doing in the dog training industry. And we can do that for our industry. And wouldn't that be an amazing thing? Something where it doesn't matter what program of horsemanship you follow, whether you're interested in vaquero horsemanship, relationship-based horsemanship, natural horsemanship, classical horsemanship, where there could be a place for us to come together and learn from each other and support each other and mentor each other. So that was the main thing.
That's beautiful. Thank you for understanding our goal and helping us put it into words. It's really useful. And what sort of benefit do you feel like the IHA might have for students as well?
One of the things that I think is going to be great for students is, the ability for them to learn and basically have a variety of options of pathways presented to them, because a lot of students, they feel a little bit lost. They don't really know which direction to go. And I think the IHA is a great place where somebody could go, once it gets built up and things get going, it'll be a place where people can go to find an instructor that, that matches the particular pathway that they want to go down. Because sometimes, we have an instructor that they're on the same pathway as us, like say you're studying vaquero horsemanship. Maybe you've got an instructor, but maybe it's not the best fit of instructor. So if there's a place like the IHA, there is a place like the IHA, you guys exist, that had that directory, which you guys have. It's a place for students to be able to find, to be able to connect students and instructors with one another.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Fawn, for helping us build that. And it is definitely something that we're building. It's not a completed project, but your help tonight is a huge factor in helping us progress to the next step. So thank you for that. And so all of you, if you're ready, Fawn has an excellent presentation here for us. I haven't even seen the whole thing, so I'll be asking questions and sitting on the edge of my seat as we go through it. If you do have a question, please type it in the chat. We are going to try to hold most of the questions till the end, but if it's a question that really pertains to what Fawn is talking about, then I will try to ask that question as we go through. So please type those questions in the chat, but there will be about 15 minutes at the end specifically for those questions. So just so you know, we are in for the presentation called Mindfulness in Training. And I think I'm just going to kick somebody's iPhone off there because I'm not able to mute them. So let's see. Yep, there they go. All right, so Fawn, go ahead and take it away. Mindfulness in Training.
All right. And please have some patience with me. Like I said, I'm still pretty new to Zoom. This is my very, very first live video anything. So yeah, it'll be fun. So when Farah first approached me about the topic for an IHA live event, I thought about, well, what do I really what am I passionate about? What do I want to talk about? And is there feedback on here, Farah?
Yeah, just hang on one second. We're trying to there's somebody on an iPhone that we're trying to mute or remove. And for some reason, I'm not able to do that. Oh, there I think we got them. No.
I bet it was like my dad or something. He's
Oh,
like, how
yeah.
do you Zoom? I want to listen to your thing.
Oh, that's horrible. We might have kicked him out. Go for it, right there. Sorry about that.
All right, so I wanted to talk about something that has been really meaningful to me, and that is mindfulness in training. So something that, you know, really made a big difference in my progress as a horsewoman was the ability to you know, have what we call the brain to train. And so what the brain to train is it's you know, knowing how to structure your sessions in such a way that you're maximizing efficiency. Because what really happened was, you know, for years, back when I was a Pirelli instructor, I would go around and be teaching tons of clinics, and I would see a lot of students that were out there, and I mean, they were working really, really hard. They were putting a lot of time in with their horses, and I would only, you know, get to see them, you know, once or twice a year sometimes, and they had other instructors that they were studying with, you know, when I wasn't in town, but they just weren't progressing at the rate that they should have been. I'm like, and you know, and it was really bothering me. I'm like, how come this person isn't way further ahead? I was looking at their progress, and I was like, man, I put in a fraction of that time back when I was at their stage, and I was way further. And I really didn't think that it was a talent factor. I mean, yeah, sure, I know I have some talent, but it was more than just a talent factor. There was something else. And so it was something that was, you know, kind of on my mind, in the back of my mind for quite a while. And it was something, as an instructor, that was important to me, because I get very invested in my students, and I want my students to succeed. I want them to do well. And if they don't do well, you know, I really take it hard. So it was something very meaningful to me. So I started on a quest to kind of figure out what was going on. And this has been a quest over the past, you know, 21 years or so. So I wanted to share some of the things that I discovered along the way that have really made a difference and really helped me to identify things that have been holding people back in their horsemanship. So the topic of this is mindfulness in training, because in order to get past these things that are holding people back, people really have to be able to examine their program and really think about things you know, really categorically and really analytically. So the ability to reflect on your training session, review your training session, and understand how to structure your training session. So that's a little bit of what we'll be talking about.
Well, I'm pretty excited. I'm looking forward to fast forwarding my progress. So.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I made a little PowerPoint presentation, so I'll be kind of going in and out of that. Well, maybe I'll stay in it because I might not be able to go back and forth. So I'm going to go ahead and link over to that now. All right, you guys see in the right screen, mindfulness and training?
Perfect, yep.
Perfect, yes.
Perfectly.
All right, so mindfulness and training, developing the brain to train. So first of all, before we get too far into this, I know not everybody came from a natural horsemanship background, so I just want to really quickly cover some terms so that even people that are coming from a different background, we can all be on the same page. So in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about two types of pressure. So there's two types of pressure. We have steady pressure and we have driving pressure. So steady pressure is any time that you have direct, consistent contact with your horse. So when we put our leg on, you know, when we press our leg against the horse, that's steady pressure. When we put pressure on, when we squeeze a rein, that's steady pressure. When we touch our horse with our hands on their chest, that's steady pressure. And then the other type of pressure that we use with our horses in training is driving pressure. So driving pressure or rhythmic pressure, that's where we're using spatial, it's a type of spatial pressure. So we're using a rhythmic motion with our hands, with our tools, with something to basically describe a space and use spatial pressure to cause our horses to move. Now, you know, spatial driving pressure, that's predominantly what horses use in their communication with each other. So it's the one that's actually easiest. And the more difficult one is steady pressure with most horses. So we have 4 phases of steady pressure. So when we're using pressure, you want to think about, and we talk about 4 phases. So the first phase is the lightest phase that we would use. So we want to define what those 4 phases are, because a lot of people, you want to think of, say for example, if you've ridden with Buck Brannaman, he has a saying, do as little as possible, but as much as necessary. Offer him a good deal, then do what it takes to be effective. So we want to be able to really quantify, in the beginning for somebody what those 4 phases are. So phase 1 would be, say you were to touch your arm, and you were just to touch the hair on your arm, not the skin, but just the hair. That would be as light as I could possibly imagine being, without, actually, but still touching the horse. Phase 2, let's say now you're touching the skin, but you're not denting the skin, you're just touching it. That would be phase 2. Phase 3 would be touching the muscle. So now you're going past the skin to where you're making a dent in the skin and you can feel the muscles underneath. That would be your phase 3. And then phase 4 is, once you run into bone, you can't go further than that. Okay, so bone is that's the strongest pressure that you can use. So, so just kind of being able to really name the lightest possible and the firmest possible for steady pressure. So then the 4 phases of driving pressure, they're a little bit more difficult to explain, but, so we use them in a more conceptual way to describe these. So the first phase would be suggest. So if we're using spatial pressure to suggest something. So, if I was to suggest, I could say, hey, Farah, I think it'd be a nice day to go for a walk. And Farah might go, oh, that sounds great. Or she might go, meh, I don't think it is a nice day. So then if that didn't work, well, I could move to the next phase. Well, I could ask her, I could say, hey, Farah, would you please, would you go for a walk with me? And she might go, meh, no, I really don't feel like it. So then I might have to go to the next phase. Or I might go, Farah, I really want you to go for a walk with me. And she might go, meh, I really don't want to. And then I might go, well, Farah, I promise if you go for a walk with me, you're going to have more fun than if you stay here, because right here, something not so great is going to happen. But if you go with me, life is going to be awesome. So,
like a piano falling on my head. That would be bad.
Yes. really move that spot. Yeah, exactly. So let me see if I can go back to stop share for a second. Start video. All right. So for example, with our phases, so you might start out just super, super soft as a suggest, and then you might kind of get bigger. And I don't know how bad that is with my cowboy hat.
It looks pretty magical, actually.
So the first 2 phases of our driving pressure, there's no contact with the horse. They're pretty friendly. Just think about light and friendly. Suggest and ask, I'm just going to be using my phases. Maybe I'll get bigger, but it's spatial pressure. I'm not making contact. Phase 3 and phase 4, I might actually make contact with my horse. So really being able to understand what is phase 1 or 2 of your driving game and what is phase 3 or 4, of using that driving pressure. So let's see, let me go back to share my screen.
And I think it's people really appreciate you reviewing those things if they haven't had a horsemanship background. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely. And it's important that we're all talking the same vocabulary. So understanding, the use of phases, what is as light as possible, what is as firm as necessary. And then the next thing we need to talk about is the phases of learning. So in these different phases of learning, depending on, what phase the horse is in the first phase of learning, that's when we're teaching the horse something. So when we're teaching our horse something in each of these different phases, we're going to apply the word phases. I was asking Farah, I'm like, what should we call this? And we decided learning phases, but then the problem is I'm talking about phases. So when I say learning phases, I don't mean like phase, I mean like the how we apply our phases in the learning process. So in the teaching, we're going to be using phases that are really slow and methodical and broken down. So the horse can really see something coming and have a chance to respond, because they have no freaking idea what it is we're asking them to do in the beginning. It is completely alien language to them. So we have to be calm, we have to be consistent, we have to be methodical, we have to set it up so we make it as clear as possible for the horse. So when we're teaching something, and I'm in a teaching phase with my horse, anytime my horse doesn't understand what I'm asking, or they get unconfident about something. I'll often go back to teaching phases. So that's where we'll go phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. So maybe hair for a few seconds, then skin, then muscle, then bone. So that I have 4 really clear phases. And as soon as my horse gives me a slight try, I'll do a complete release. So this is where the release really teaches. So really being aware of when I should be in teaching phases with my horse. So anytime my horse doesn't know something, it's new, or they get unconfident about something, I can go back to my teaching phases. So the next place that I might have to be in, the next application is there's controlling phases. So a time when I might have to use controlling phases is when my horse takes off or takes over. So so this isn't about me asking the horse to do something. This is about the horse doing something that I did not ask. So obviously, as much as possible, we don't want to have to try to control our horse too much because they're claustrophobic animals, but there are certain situations where I'm not going to let my horse run me over, and I'm not going to let my horse run somebody else over. So that's when I'll use my control phases. So control phases, one way of thinking about that is match your horse with their intensity and with their commitment, mirror that intensity commitment, but then do enough that you override it. So match, mirror, and override. So for example, if my horse is going to mow me over, I need to match that with enough of a block that I not just stop them, but there's a little bit of a rebound. So that's the control phase, match, mirror, and override. Or another example of the control phase would be something we call a pattern interrupt. So for example, if my horse is all of a sudden just losing their mind, sometimes, you can come in there kind of like give them a smack on the cheek and hey, snap out of it. And they go, oh, thanks, I needed that. So that's the equivalent of a pattern interrupt. It's something to get their attention and break them out of whatever it is that they're fixated on. So those are kind of 2 concepts of to give examples of how we might use control phases. And I'll use those, like I said, when my horse is taking off or taking over. So the next, go ahead.
I really like how you put that your horse is taking off or taking over. It's not a matter of controlling the teaching environment as much as it's kind of a different application, the teaching and the controlling. Thank you.
Absolutely. And then the next stage that our horse might be in of learning is, I might be in my reinforcing, it might be time to use reinforcing phases. So reinforcing phases, this is what I use once my horse understands what I'm asking, but maybe it's not that important to them, or they're not really that sharp about it. So they understand what I'm asking for, but they're like, hey, I've got maybe somewhere between 1.5 and maybe 3 seconds in between phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. And maybe it's a pretty energy efficient horse. I'm like, I got a good 9 seconds before things get uncomfortable. So in reinforcing, if we just stayed in teaching phases, and I had this horse was my original Pirelli Levels horse. She could count to 9. And right before I hit 10, she moved like a 1/2 inch. And I'm like, gosh. And I thought back then that, back then I was a Pirelli student. I was a very good Pirelli student. I was a very obedient Pirelli student. I thought that I had to put exactly 3 seconds between each phase. I was a very literal learner. So I was trying to progress, and I just was I was just hitting this wall because my horse was just, basically waiting to the last second to avoid the uncomfortable phase and then moving. So we weren't progressing anywhere. So
they can't count. That is completely false. They can count.
She could, though, I swear to God. So anyway, so reinforcing, when my horse knows something, but they're just taking their sweet time about it. So in reinforcing phases, this is where the one that you hear Buck Brandon talk and Ray Hunt talk about, offer them a good deal, then do what it takes to be effective. So this is reinforcement phases. And the interesting thing is, when I go to my clinics with Buck, you don't really hear them talking about this first and second application phases. You hear them talking about, third stage, reinforcing. The problem is, if I go to reinforcement phases before my horse understands, now I'm getting, you know, I run the risk of really scaring them and damaging the relationship. And causing a lot of conflict. And those are things that I don't want in my relationship with my horse, and I would like to avoid. And I'm not saying that, you know, that Buck does go straight to reinforcing phases. Like if you watch him, he uses teaching phases on a horse that's unsure. He uses controlling phases. He uses all these, but, you know, people aren't necessarily talking about and explaining this enough. So long phase 1, offer him a good deal, and then quickly to phase 4, do what it takes. And this is something I want to talk about too. Do what it takes to what? You know, because a lot of people, like, you know, they say, well, phase 4, what is the point of phase 4? What are we trying to accomplish with phase 4? And I want to stop sharing for a minute so you guys can see my face. So, you know, phase 4, why are we going to phase 4? A lot of people think, well, phase 4 is to get the horse to move its feet. That is wrong. That is incorrect. I am not going to phase 4 to get my horse to move their feet. So why, you know, so there, you know, there's a lot of reasons I'm going to phase 4. I might go to phase 4 to get my horse's attention. You know, so I can use phase 4 to get their attention. I can go long phase 1, quickly to phase 4, then boom, they look at me, and they thank you. Now I have your attention, and now we can do something. So, you know, I can use my phase 4 to get their attention. Another thing that I can use my phase 4 for is to add meaning to something. So for example, if I'm going long phase 1 and then they go to kind of push their nose into, you know, into something, maybe I'll go to that phase 4 to add a little bit of meaning to whatever they're pushing on. So I'm still not necessarily maybe trying to get them to yield, but maybe I'm just trying to add a little bit of meaning to my bubble, to my presence, to my tool, to my leg, to something, because maybe they're pushing on it, maybe they're challenging it. So my phase 4
actually put a physical barrier.
Sorry, say that again?
Just to actually put a physical barrier to this imaginary, let's say we have an imaginary bubble and we create a physical barrier.
Yeah, or you can even think about, I talk a lot about bubbles in my workshops. I can say, you know, and I think about, I have a bubble and my tools have a bubble. You know, like if I'm using a flag or a stick, the goal is that I don't want to have to touch my horse with that. So I create a bubble around it. But if my horse doesn't respect the bubble, then I'll touch the horse. And so I kind of electrify, I add meaning to, it's like an electric fence. So when I say, you know, add meaning, that's what I'm talking about. So I'm adding meaning. The other reason I'll use phase 4 is to get my horse to search. Like maybe they're not searching, so you have to do enough to cause them to search. So rather than thinking using phase 4 to move your horse's feet, think about using phase 4 to get their attention, to add meaning, to, you know, to encourage them to search. And another thing that I'll use my phase 4 for is to give them support, to clarify, to kind of say, you're on the right track. Yes, you've got it. It really is this. So my phase 4, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a big hard whack. Like my phase 4, like for Billy on my little buckskin, that just tapping him with my finger is my buckskin's phase 4. That's what it takes to cause meaning. That's what it takes to support. That's what it takes, you know, to be effective. So, you know, as we progress with our horses, our phases will be continually refined. So what used to be phase 4 is now phase 400, you know, because our horses get lighter, softer, more responsive. So,
and you'll find that, like you said, with Billy, your phase 4 was touching him. Don't you find that different horses have different phase 4s? Like some like to wrestle, and other ones just are like, oh, you tickled me, ah. So it depends on, I think it's great what you said, that the phase of learning that they're in, but also that they're just who they are in their personality. Would you
Absolutely.
agree? Okay. And we are at 6:30 right now, so just so you know.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So you know, even though in the beginning we defined the 4 phases, that's where you start, but that's not where you live. That's just a starting point for somebody getting started, so they can, you know, at least have 4 of something. So they start as light as they know the full range, the full spectrum of possibilities of phases. What's as light as possible? What is as firm as possible? You know, but then within that, you know, there's an infinite possibility of what those phases could be. So moving on. And then, there we go. Oh shoot, hold on, I gotta share my screen again. Then the next one would be refining. So in refining, and here's the thing, if I stay in reinforcement phases where I do the long phase 1 quickly to phase 4, I offer them a good deal, and if they don't go, I mean, Buck has this saying, I cringe when he says it sometimes, because I'm like, oh, don't say that, Buck, you just lost all the horse huggers out there. He says, offer them a good deal, if they don't go, break a rib. And I'm like, oh no. He has worse ones than that, I swear to God. I won't repeat those ones. Yeah, offer them a good deal. If they don't go, break a rib. And you know, he doesn't actually mean that. He's talking to like the the grannies up there that that they're not gonna bump their horse hard enough to kill a butterfly, most likely. Those ones he's talking to. But so but the thing is, if I stay in reinforcement phases, I can get a horse that's a little bit on the punchy side, and that's what happened when I started working with Billy. Is I spent a lot of time in reinforcement phases, but then he was getting a little too sharp, a little too tense. I had so I didn't have enough relaxation. And that's why when I learned about these 4 stages, that's why I went, oh, I need to be in refinement. I need to be using refining application of phases. So that's where I might go. It looks like teaching phases. I might go phase 1 slowly. And he's used to a long phase 1 quickly to phase 4, but then instead I go phase 2, and he's like, oh, maybe I go phase 3. He's like, no, I'm moving. Okay, back to phase 1. So instead of the complete release that we did up here in the teaching phases, down here I'll go back to phase 1 and then get the movement and release. So that's the difference between teaching and the refining. So if I go back to phase 1 and he just quits altogether, well, then I might be in the wrong stage. So really being able to evaluate not only which of these phases, do you want to be in, are you in, but also, really being able to evaluate, am I going through the phases? Am I applying my phases in a really correct and methodical way? So this is part of the mindfulness and training. If we really understand which stage of learning our horse is in a given moment, this is not like a straight line progression. This is something where this can change on a moment's notice. Maybe I'm normally working my horse in refinement phases, but then all of a sudden he gets scared and I got to jump back to controlling phases, because he tries to take off. Then all of a sudden, okay, he's not trying to take off anymore, but he's gotten a little unconfident, he's a little distracted. Maybe I have to, or he just kind of is too distracted to understand. So maybe I'll go back to teaching phases for a moment just to help him out, just to he kind of comes back. So just kind of being able to read the situation and understanding which application of phases.
And isn't it true, as you're progressing, like each maneuver, let's say, if we're building up to a canter, and now our horse is, first we're just happy to get a canter, and then we're looking at the posture of the canter and the weight of the canter. Every time you add some level of difficulty, which I think you're leading up to, right? That you have to re-evaluate those learning phases. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we're gonna there's layers of onions that we're gonna be peeling back, and I don't know if we're gonna have time to get through all this great stuff, but I got so many things. But I can talk a lot if you haven't noticed. So.
It's perfect.
Absolutely. So these are just some concepts, though, that if a student can wrap their head around these things, it really helps them to go back. Not when you're in the session, you're thinking at night, you're feeling during the day. That's a saying that was told to me way back at the beginning of my horsemanship journey. It's really served me well. Do your thinking at night. That's where I go back and I really evaluate, how did the session go? What did I like? What was I pleased with? What didn't I like? What things did I feel like I could have done better? What things didn't go as well as I wanted, and why? So that's the whole I needed to know why. Why didn't something work?
Yeah.
This is what really led me to really dive into some of these concepts, because these are things many of you guys have heard, depending on which program you've been in. You guys have heard these things over the years, but until they had to get a new level of meaning and depth before I was actually able to utilize these things.
Mm-hmm. I think it's brilliant to just go through and, like you said, over all of your different teachers that you've had, Can you tell us some of that? I obviously know you've studied with Pat Pirelli, but you've studied with many different instructors. Can you tell us some of those different instructors that you have been currently playing with, working with, and then in the past? So that would be very interesting to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I started in Pirelli in 1997. And then I graduated the Pirelli program and became a professional and started studying their Colt Starting Difficult Horses Foundation Training horse development program, basically. And I started getting bucked off a lot. I was all of a sudden, rather than being on my kind of, tame, gentle horses, I was getting put on some pretty rank horses. So I had a few flying lessons, a few concussions, a few pretty good, one horse almost kicked my head off. I literally had the graze of his hoof across my cheek.
Oh my gosh, not okay.
Yeah, and I was starting to lose a bit of confidence. I'm like, man, I was a little cocky going in, thinking, oh, I can ride a horse that bucked. Well, I thought I could ride a horse that bucked. I had just never been on one that had really bucked. So I had a pretty humbling experience with that, and that was back in about 2002. I was up in Montana at the Cross de l'Essence Pirelli deal that they did up there, studying with Ronnie Willis. And so at the time, I was looking for answers. I'm like, why? Once again, there's that why. Why am I getting bucked off? Like, I did the things. I bent my horse. But they didn't stop. Why? So there's these things that weren't working. And I felt a little bit let down, a little bit, kind of betrayed. I'm like, well, Pat said if I could bend my horse, I could stop them.
Right.
I kind of already learned that wasn't the case, but it was really bothering me because now I was an instructor and I had this responsibility to my students to teach them solid information, and there was things that weren't working. So that's when I discovered Buck Ranneman. And Buck would be horrified if he ever heard me say this, but I honestly say Buck taught me to do Pirelli properly. And Buck's not a fan of Pirelli. He's
we'll promise not to tell him that.
Don't take your orange stick to one of his clinics. I tell my students, like, take your halters off, put a bit in, because if you don't, you're gonna catch flack. But when I started riding with him, he really taught me how to do things with excellence, and he taught me why. There were so many exercises I'd learned from Pat, but I hadn't ever learned why. Because Pat's a concept person, he's a big picture person, he's not a detail person. Buck is detail. He is analytical detail. Why, when, how, and I just ate that stuff up like you wouldn't believe. So I started riding with him in 2002. I was doing anywhere from 4 to 7 clinics a year. I was literally stalking the man. I would show up everywhere from the East Coast to the West Coast. I'd fly in, I'd drive in, I was obsessed. I was like, this guy has information. He is, and thank God, because I'll tell you, I started some rank horses after that. And thanks to what I learned from Buck as well as Pirelli, I was successful, and I did not get bucked off horses that I would have been killed on before that education. So it was awesome.
So you really from Buck learned a deeper level of timing and like when to apply those things and when not to, it by knowing why you were doing it in the first place. That's brilliant.
Absolutely.
And I heard recently you're also studying Phillips Carl's program. Is that correct?
Yes, and that brings me to the most recent one. I was already studying with Karen Rolfe, who I absolutely loved. She's phenomenal. She's one of my, my mentors. I really look up to her on so many levels as a human being as well as a horsewoman. So I had been studying with her, but at the time it was, she didn't really have a school. And I had a horse with kissing spine, and I needed more structured, regular, consistent, hands-on help. And so I heard about the École de Légèreté because I knew they did in-hand work. And I'd been told that my horse needed some in-hand work to help him learn how to move his body better. So I flew to Europe and I went to meet Philippe Carl. I saw him teaching. I saw some of my colleagues that were Pirelli master instructors over in Europe. I saw them being taught by Philippe and also teaching students under Philippe's eye, and I was blown away. So I signed up, and I've been in that program since 2013. So I'm a trainee instructor working on my certification in the École de Légèreté.
And we have some questions on how to spell that.
I'll write it out in the chat.
Okay, that'd be perfect.
Let's see.
We appreciate you so much. Oh, thank you so much. There you go. And what you mentioned Karen Rolfe. What was the most important thing, or one of the very important things that you learned from Karen Rawl?
Actually, it's going to be in the slides. So, and I've actually quoted her. So.
Oh, okay. Well,
Let's go back to that first. Do I have to?
Yes, let's do that.
All right, let's go back to this. All right. So one of the things, I don't know if this one was one that I heard from Karen. I can't remember where I first heard this one, but don't leave your horse hanging on a phase 4. So getting back to mindfulness and training, because I know I want to give you guys some real, content. I don't want to be too fluffy in any of the stuff I do. I like to give people things they can apply. So this single concept was so huge for me. Don't leave your horse hanging on a phase 4. So if I have to go to a phase that is, a higher phase, a phase 3 or a phase 4, one of the principles that, and this is something that this sentence, whoever I heard this from, once I really dove into this, it gave me the understanding of, oh, I need to repeat something until I can get it at a phase 1 response. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit now about qualities of excellence, because this was something that, when I talk about people that were having issues with, issues with progressing, I can't tell you how many times, the lack of a clear definition of excellence has held people back. Because, somebody would be telling me, I'm having a problem with my horse trying to run off with me. I say, okay, well, how's your hindquarter disengagement? It's, oh, it's good. And, when it comes to horse people, trust no one. So I would always say, okay, show me. And so they would go to show me, their yield, and it was anything but good. I'm like, oh my goodness, how can they call that good? So I'm like, all right, we have to define qualities of excellence. So this is something, when we have that saying, don't leave your horse hanging on phase 4, leave them hanging on excellence. Okay, so finish something. So if you have to go to phase 3 or 4, don't hesitate. Get in, get it done, get out. For whatever you're trying to get done, but then repeat the yield until as many times as necessary to get excellence. And when I say repeat the yield, I break things down into what I call foundation yields. Moving the hind, moving the front, right or left, moving them backwards, and moving them forwards. Those are my foundation yields. Those are my yields that I want each of those yields, my horse to give me excellence in them. So we have to know what excellence looks like. So the first quality of excellence is it light? Was it at phase 1 or 2? Did it feel like pushing a paper boat across the water if it was steady pressure? Was that how light it was? Did I just barely have to, did I have to suggest a movement? Did I just have to kind of open and, or just invite my horse, a friendly invitation if I'm using driving pressure? Is that all it took? Or did I have to go to muscle bone? Did I have to make contact? Did I have to actually touch my horse with my tool, with my leg, with something? So, was it at phase 1 or 2? So the next quality of excellence is, was it a prompt initiation? So when you're, evaluating your foundation yields, ask yourself, how quickly did they initiate the yield? Not how fast did they take the step, not the speed, but how quickly did they get ready to do what I was asking? And we want that to be within a second and a half. So kind of 1 Mississippi, or maybe even 1 Mississippi 2. Like one, but not 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. That's a bit long. So really, working on the promptness of initiation, evaluating that. How prompt is my horse? And a draft horse, because a draft horse is going to move slower than an Arabian, but they can both start to get ready just as quickly.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a fabulous way of putting it too, though, saying that there's actually a moment where you say something and it has to travel to their brain, and they have to prepare the motion. I think people don't realize it, so I think that's a fabulous way of putting it. And just so you know, you're not sharing your screen anymore. I don't know if you did that.
I like to see us talking when we're having.
Oh, okay, that's perfect.
Be a little more interactive,
That's perfect. And you've got about 5 minutes. Just everyone, if you have some questions, you can start typing in those chat, and Fawn is going to answer those questions in about 5 minutes. So go ahead and continue your phases of lightness, Fawn, or of excellence, excuse me.
So the next quality I'm looking for is, was it a positive reflex? So a positive reflex is, that's the first thought. A reflex is the first thing they do. So the first step. So was it a positive reflex? Was the first step the good step? So if I'm asking them to back up, they don't kind of take a crooked step and then a backward step. Or if I'm asking for the hindquarters, you know, they don't step forward and then over. They go directly into the yield. So it's, you know, in the direction of the yield. And the other thing, you know, a positive reflex, you know, it also, that first step is the good step. It also has flow. So I'm looking for, it's in the direction of the yield with flow. So they flow into it. There's no opposition. It's not sticky. They're not kind of going, but, you know, going, trying to slow down. You know, they're not kind of going, thinking of kind of pushing back, like, oh, I don't really want to. There's no, you know, if it's a positive reflex, if there's commitment to it. And if it's committed, it's got flow. You know, so think about pushing a beach ball versus pushing a chair. You know, so it's not sticky if you have a horse that's trying to stop, or it's not staccato if you have a horse that maybe they're going, but they're going fast and tight. You know, so you don't want them running off. You know, flow is just flow. It's not, you know, it's not sticky trying to slow down. It's not fast trying to run away.
Would you say that rhythm would be a good quality of flow or something similar?
Absolutely.
Or is that something?
If it doesn't have rhythm, it doesn't have flow. Yeah, so
Okay.
rhythm, flow, but something can have rhythm but be sticky. It could be sticky rhythm, or it can have rhythm and be staccato. So it is rhythm, but it's more than just rhythm. So rhythm is like a consistency, like it stayed, you know, it kind of is steady. I would say steadiness. But we also are looking for a certain commitment too. So that feeling of flow, that was something that was really important to me, that I was getting in these basic yields. And then the last part was, do I have a touchdown? So when I stop riding, does my horse stop going? You know, when I drop my life, does my horse drop their life? So I call that a touchdown. Can I get my horse to boom, to land, to have a touchdown? So the question I ask is, you know, and when I do that touchdown, how long, when I drop my life, does it take for my horse, the butterflies, if my horse's energy were butterflies, how long does it take the butterflies to land? Yeah.
I love that descriptor.
Yeah.
I knew that that mentorship and collaborating would be a great thing. And I'm just sitting here picking up all of these phrases that I'm like, oh, I can't wait to play with those too. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's brilliant. So
yeah, there was a bunch more I had, but I think this will be a good one to wrap this segment up on. And, you know, maybe we'll do another IHA live, because this is really just the intro to some really cool stuff. But I wanted to then also, hold on. There we go. Share screen. Sorry. I was going so smooth.
Oh, it's okay. It's fun switching back and forth, like you said.
So for those qualities of excellence, you know, that we had the don't leave your horse hanging on a phase 4. Okay, so that was the idea. So if they're hanging on a phase 4, you want to repeat it until you have those 4 qualities, because you don't want your horse to, you don't want to ask your horse to sustain, to give you more, you know, to give you more steps of something that they didn't willingly offer. And this is what, I don't know if she got it from somebody else, but the first time I ever heard this was from Karen Rolfe. And it was just like, yes, it made such an impact on my training, and helped me define a whole bunch of things that totally transformed my training program and my awareness, my mindfulness of what I was getting in my yields, what I was releasing for, what I was quitting on. So, you know, when we talk about those foundation yields, you know, the moving the hind, moving the front, going forward, going backwards, what I found is a lot of people thought their horses knew their foundation yields, thought they were clear on them, but they really didn't. Because I would ask them to show me a basic yield, and I would ask them, which of those 4 qualities of the exercise were there? Was it at phase 1 or 2? Was it within a second and a half? Was the first step the good step in the direction of the yield with flow? And when you stopped, did they stop? Yeah, and I like that is an awareness that I didn't realize I had that awareness until I had apprentices at my place, and I had to explain to them, like, no, do it again. Yeah, like, yeah, it's still not excellent. And I would just have them repeat this, and it would be something simple, a hindquarter yield. And all we would be looking for was one better step. We would say, you know, and this is another saying, is reward the slightest try, but then reward the slightest better try. So this is a concept that's super important for progressing, is reward the slightest better try. And reward the slightest better try of a very simple thing, move the hind, one, and you know, and maybe I have to go a full circle to get one better step, but I release for the one better step. Only looking for one quality step, or at least one step that's one step closer to quality. And I'll release for improvement in any of those 4 areas. There we go. I can go back. I'm not on the screen anymore.
So that I think that's a brilliant 1% better, and people want it to be 100% better right away, and that's impossible, especially the more complicated, the more technical thing that you're asking your horse. And we have to, I feel like that's important for students too. If they feel like they've made 1% of improvement, or like you said, it's just a little bit better than it was, then they need to think that they did a better job too. It's not perfect. I didn't say perfect, but it was a little bit better. Actually, there was a very good question. There's some great questions coming up, and if you have not typed your question in the chat, please do so. Fawn is ready to answer some questions here. But
you just kind of go through and kind of look through and read some of them, and I'll read them out loud and try to answer them.
Yeah, actually, I'll read them right here for you, so no worries about that. About this specific topic, Andrew Turnbull asks, how do you know when you're drilling, like it's too much drilling? You know, it's very important to repeat that until you get 1% better, but when do you quit? You know, when does the horse get sick of it too?
No, that's an excellent question, and you know, if we had like 2 hours or maybe even 3 hours, I have a whole bunch more stuff to go into that very question. So, but I'll try to just summarize. So how do we keep from drilling? There's a couple different things. You know, one is making it, you know, asking something that's achievable, and you don't, you know, and what I say is don't leave them hanging on a phase 4, but you know, maybe it's not a phase 4, but maybe it's not perfection. So you can keep chipping away at that, you know, all the time. But like, we're not asking our horse to do something complicated. Like maybe I just pick one yield. You know, maybe it's a horse that really doesn't know anything. It's the first time I've worked with them, I've played with them, and they don't know anything. So maybe I say, hey, we're going to teach you just to move your hindquarters over. And you would be amazed. Like it seems like it maybe would take a long time to get all 4 qualities of excellence. And you know, that's what I used to think. And then I spent some time with Michael Wansonreed, where he took a 20-year-old draft horse that had been retired. It used to be, it was never ever ridden, it was just driving horses, heavy as heck. And within 15 minutes, he had that horse, all of its foundation yield lighter than my level 4 horse. Awesome. And that was an eye-opening moment to me. And that, I think having him, because Pat was not actually my, the person that I strived to look like when I was in Pirelli. Mikey was my model. Mikey was the one that I wanted to model myself after, because he danced with the horses. And when I saw that, that's when I realized, you know, these 4 qualities, they are achievable very quickly. You know, once we get good at, you know, understanding how to use our phases, what stage we're supposed to be in. So the important thing is, you know, understand that it's more about us than it is about the horse, and you can quit at any time. And, you know, what I'm looking for is just an improvement. So look, you know, you can quit on any improvement. Just make sure you're rewarding a good frame of mind. You know, go until the horse, you know, you're feeling like the horse has made some changes, is making progress in the right direction. And, you know, if it takes you a while to kind of really wrap your head around these things, maybe you have to stop and wait and think about it. But we're not asking for something we're asking something very simple. So you can repeat this. And when they give you a good try, maybe you go to the other side and you do it on that side for a little bit. And, you know, I have a whole talk on motivation and how to build motivation in your training sessions too. So we'll have to save that for a future session. I got so much. I got too many things to share.
Actually, I don't think it's too many at all. And there's a couple of questions left here, but I just want to tell everyone we have 67 people on this call, Fawn. That is spectacular. Congratulations.
I have no idea.
That's fabulous. And the IHA can't thank you enough, Fawn, for the help that you're giving us, bringing students together, bringing people together. Just so you know, I just want to take just 1 minute here. I'm going to steal your screen for a second. And I want to bring up, if you have enjoyed this call tonight with all of Fawn's amazing information, we have something really exciting going on with the IHA. It's actually what we call the IHA Academy. And we're going to try to get Fawn to put this up as a course, because she says she's got a lot of information. I know she does. So the IHA, we're just launching what is called the IHA Academy. It is a learning management software that we want to collaborate with all kinds of fabulous horsemanship instructors. There are free courses on here for members, and there will be premium content, like if Fawn does a private course with people, does video coaching, does specific courses, that will be on the IHA Academy. And this is just starting up. There is courses right now that you can go look at, kind of the idea. There's a foundation horsekeeping class there where you can go through, and if you want to look at parts of the horse or parts of horse anatomy, we're going to be slowly adding to that. Fawn, you're going to have to start your course pretty quick, I think, because even if you do a little talk like this once a week, I think you might have some excited people that would like to show up for that talk. But please take a look at the IHA Academy. The IHA has reduced their fees after talking with Fawn. She said, let's let people in as soon as we can. Again, this is a nonprofit. That means we're poor, okay? Organization trying to do this with volunteers right now, working really, really hard. So please visit internationalhorsemanship.org website. For $6 for 1 month or $50 a year, you can be a digital member. So please check that out. And tell your friends about it. And Fawn, I think we have time. There's a really cool question. I'm going to stop sharing. So you can find that again at internationalhorsemanship.org. I'm going to bring up and just so you know, all of these IHA Lives, yes, they are recorded, and you can find them on the IHA website under the media button. And so Shannon, to wrap this up, Shannon had a fabulous question. She said, hi, Fawn, can you speak a little bit about obedience when progressing with horses? I've heard people say that they don't want a horse to be obedient as they see a horse being robotic or non-participating partner. My view is if push comes to shove, I need them to respond in order to save our lives. Absolutely. Then the level of obedience needs to exist. Just curious on your thoughts on obedience.
Now that's a really, really good question, and it's something that that a lot of people is on their mind. And if we're not careful, we can go too much to the obedience mindset or too much to the kind of let them do whatever they want and walk all over us. So I absolutely believe that if push comes to shove and I need my horse to do something, I need them to do it, because that might be a life or death situation. I'm absolutely on board with that. The way I look at it is I want to structure my sessions with my horse so that maybe 90%, maybe 95% of the time I set it up to where my horse has a choice. I set it up, I do enough with my horse that I cause them to search. And when they're searching, I don't do any more. I get real quiet and I let them search. And when they choose the answer that I was looking for, I do everything I can to make that feel good. And with anything I'm doing, with my foundation meals, with my upper level stuff, that is what I try. I don't always succeed, none of us do, but I try to, as much as possible, do that. And I want the majority of my training to be that way, the majority of it. But there are going to be times where, I do need to practice that, hey, not 10 days later, that promptness of initiation is a super important thing. Like how quickly do they initiate? Is it a positive reflex? And that's where having the difference in the different phases, the reinforcement phases, it's like, hey, I'm asking for something, and quickly to phase 4. So they really start to, not take their time on things, but it becomes important for them to respond quickly. So I find that I don't really think about obedience with my horses. They just are obedient, but not in a robotic way at all. It's, it's because I really think about building motivation in my horse and really clear communication. Because I think if you have excellent communication, if your horse knows what you're asking, like look at my horse Billy, he will turn himself inside out to figure out what it is I'm asking him to do. Like he has so much try, and that was, makes stuff I get all like, fills my heart when I think about it. Like that's what drew me to horsemanship. It's not the physical, it's the mental, because this style of horsemanship is setting it up, and causing them to search, building motivation, having really clear communication. It creates a horse that tries their heart out to figure out what you're asking them to do, because they have absolute faith and hope and faith and belief that if they do what you're asking, it is going to be a good deal for them. So that's what I think about is, but absolutely, when you develop your horse like that, it's not about, just letting them walk all over you. It's about, teaching them to be good learners so that they make the choice to be with you, and to where that is super strong. And then, maybe that 5 to 10% of the time, you maybe have to, do control phases. That's the control phases. That shouldn't be 90% of your session. Control phases where they're taking off or they're taking over, match, mirror, override, pattern, interrupt right now. But that's not the majority. That's the minority of my sessions. But absolutely, I'll go there if I need to, and I don't hesitate, because that's, that's a safety issue then.
Well, and it's honestly, they don't want to be in that worried. They love it when they're like, oh my gosh, you could save me. Thank you for taking over this situation, because I can't handle it. So I think what you said about really having a conversation, and when you do have that conversation and give them those choices, they do choose the right choice most of the time, and the more time you spend with them, it just becomes really a true partnership, like you talked about. Fawn, this was awesome. You are getting tons of thumbs up. If you enjoyed this, give Fawn a little happy face, thumbs up. But there is all kinds of requests. People say you have to come to California. They're missing you from the Nova Scotia and the Maritime, San Francisco.
I would love to come to California, by the way. My husband did a business plan for my, he's like, you need to go to California. I'm like, okay.
That's wonderful. And so just so you know, everyone, excellent compliments. They're looking forward to your course. I made that up, but I am looking forward to your course. We'll help you do that. Thank you so much for coming tonight, Fawn. It's honestly, I enjoy talking to you so much as a comrade, and I learned a lot tonight about just the way you present things and the different wording you use. So thank you for giving that to me. And thank you again, everyone else, for coming tonight. We so appreciate it. Look for this on the IHA website. It will be posted there under community. Please tell your friends about the IHA so we can keep these things going. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
Wow, you got tons of happy faces, Fawn.